Hey there guys, how's it going? So this is my first video post the release of my Kingdom Hearts Key, Unchained Key, Union Cross back cover, all of it, story recap, and I just wanted to make this thank you at the start of the video saying, yeah, just really expressing my gratitude for how well that video's been received. My little YouTube bots like beep boop, you're, getting a lot of likes compared to views ratio going on right here, and I'm like, cool, that's really nice. All your comments have been like so supportive, so yeah, thank you very much. Obviously that did take, like a lot of you said, quite a long time to make, and again, I've been talking about this thing for months, and yeah, it's finally done, so thank you guys very much. If you haven't seen it, I can definitely recommend watching it if you have any interest in this game's relevance to other games, Kingdom Hearts 3 and beyond, potentially. Just because, when you put out a story over 5 years, and that is what it's been, since the release of Kingdom Hearts Key, with all its like exclusive cutscenes and all the stuff that you, if you've only played Union Cross or Unchained, wouldn't have seen, all the way through, it's 3 years, and then the transition period between it and Unchained, and then the switch over to Union Cross, that was 5 years, and little tiny little minute details, you forget about them when they're only delivered once a month, and you can basically ignore over half of them. So yeah, I definitely recommend giving that a watch. And like to all of you guys that have already shared it and promoted it in other places, thank you so very much. If any of you guys are watching and want to support me, sharing it around with other people that might want to watch it as well, have an interest in the story, and getting it into the hands of the people that can broadcast it, people that have already tried doing that, again, I just want to thank you so very much for doing that. Anyway, enough about me. I'm sorry, I'm really terrible at like self-promotion, but let's talk about the content of the video that I wanted to talk about today, which is the new avatar boards, which I think are close to mandatory in terms of purchasing. They're so freaking good, so let's go ahead and switch over. Okay, first of all, we have the return of the Halloween, Donald, and Goofy boards. Very skippable, obviously. They're quite old boards at this point. Cool to have them back, though. In terms of the skills, definitely don't need them at all. But in terms of the medals, if you do want to fill out your album completion, you could potentially pick these up because of that. But saying that, if you go ahead and complete the event boards that are out in the event till the end of the month, you can actually get one copy of Halloween Goofy A, which is that one, and Halloween Donald A, which is that one there. So it's really cool. If you just want the album completion, you actually don't need to buy those boards, which is really nice. Moving on, we have the Jafar and Ursula and Maleficent boards, around again to the end of the month as well, and a little bit beyond. In terms of the skills inside there, better than the Halloween, Donald, and Goofy ones, but still pretty missable. We're in this sort of era of Attack Boost 4 Max being like the relevant skills when these boards came out. I did actually skip literally all of them at the time, and for the I might pick them up now just for the costumes, just because they're kind of cool. Obviously very unique in terms of the inspired by the Disney villains. In terms of skills, though, this one actually isn't the worst, like the Jafar ones. You do have two Attack Boost 4 Maxes, Attack Boost 4 Max and Lux Plus, and Attack Boost 4 Max SP2, as well as Second Chance 2. Second Chance 2 at max level has a 69% proc rate. When you times that by, I'm at skill perk like 1.38 right now, so 69% times 1.38 is creeping up around to 90%, so that's almost a perfect second chance. Obviously, not perfect, but 90% proc rate is very good, so you don't necessarily need to get second chance 4. Second chance 3 honestly suffices with the amount of skill perk that we have nowadays. But if you don't want to necessarily burn like amazing skills like attack boost 6, 7, or 8, you could go ahead and throw some attack boost 4s on your medals, even just to test them out, of being like, okay, if this does this much damage, is it worth increasing it that much further to put an 8 or a 7 on it? But saying that, every single time you go into the shop now and do a pull, you are getting a medal with an attack boost 5, 6 on it, so yeah, you can probably do with skipping these as well. Okay, and then we move to the new 8 boards. So the first batch of 4 was released. We had the Halloween Leather Daddy Gimp Cat thing going on there. I don't know what's going on right there. And then we had the furry suits being the 2 werewolves. So of those two, like the biggest factor in here was AB6 Lux Plus Plus. I was like really considering buying that because I wanted to upgrade my Lux setup, but I was like, no, just sort of hold off for now. I didn't end up getting him, and I'm really glad that I didn't. Attack Boost 8 is pretty skippable, just because, again, skills that aren't max just suck. They really do just suck. They're unreliable, and if you want them for like PvP, you're going to get stomped on about a third, well, not a third, but about 25% of the time, because they just aren't going to activate. It's as simple as that. With my current skill perk, 54% activation on Attack Boost 8 times by 1.38 for the skill perk is about a 75% activation. So what that means is that's going to fail 25% of the time. If you're looking at overall damage output, that means that you're definitely better off with a 7 max, even a 6 max, honestly, because 75% of the time you're hitting with that, awesome multiplier, that 2.6 times multiplier from the Attack Boost 8, I think it is. And then the other 25% of the time you're hitting with a 1. So average that out. in terms of your average damage dealt out, you're way better off with a 6 or a 7. I've explained that a trillion times. DB6 is a little differently because you always want to have DB6 in conjunction with a DB3 max or a 4 max. Like honestly, a 4 max, like whatever the current meta max is, you want to have that if you're competing in PvP. So that isn't the worst skill to have. The 39% that triggers with times by the current skill, like my current skill perk of 1.38 means it's going to be hitting over half the time, which is pretty good. Like if you have that safety net to fall back on of a DB3 max, DB4 max, but then you have, you know, over half the time it's going to be triggering to block at the full DB6 level potential. That's pretty good. That's pretty good, especially with like single attack medals where, like if you can block a like Saeus' big boof or a Sephiroth's big like slashing hit and just eat all that up with DB6, that's definitely what you want to do. I went ahead and skipped on the board though because I was like, well, I already have some DB6s from previous boards, and I don't, like, that's going to be pretty common, I imagine, for the next few boards. I imagine we'll see a few more DB6s in the future. I do want the AB6 Lux Plus, but I'm not really willing to spend $2.5 grand on just that skill effectively. Lucky me then that we have a replacement for that. Anyway, in terms of the Werewolves though, I went ahead and looked at that and I was like, oh my god, this is an amazing board. Me personally, I'm crying out for AB7s and 0s, which is that one right there, with high score challenge medals that cost 9, you know, your Sephiroths, your Clouds, all those kinds of medals that cost 6 and restore 3. Those medals are very expensive to run, and so a 7 and 0 is like, wow, what an amazing patch up for that. That's pretty future-proof as well, because obviously Attack Boost 8 is going to have a few iterations before we get the 8s and 0s. We'll probably see an 8 and 2, 8 and 1, and then an 8 and 0. So in terms of these medals, like that's very, very current and very, very good. And for my game, I was like, I need that, so I went ahead and picked up both of them. And then along came 2 more. So we have the Halloween Nurse and Doctor. We'll talk about it in a second. We have the Halloween Crow, which in my opinion is a friggin' amazing board, absolutely amazing, and I think really mandatory for almost every player. Like if you want to do raiding, it's got you covered. AB6 Max Lux Plus. Second Chance 4, which again, very, very, very good. We just talked about that in terms of, obviously, well, Second Chance, you need that on pretty much everything, of course. And AB7 and 0 as well. So you might be thinking, well, am I annoyed that I just bought 2 boards with AB7 and 0 now that the Crow's out? Not really. I'm really not that sad about that at all, because again, there are tons of expensive medals coming out all the time. You know, Luxor just dropped. That thing costs 7. All these medals that come out with high costs, this thing patches that up really, really nicely. You know, Marluxia could come out next month, and then, you know, Larkseed the month after that. Who knows how much they're going to cost? I can see Marluxia being a pretty costly boy, just because, I don't know why, but that seems to make sense in my head that he would cost a fair bit. And in my case, that's perfect as well. I was wanting Lux Plus, and I was like, no, just hold on a little bit, you never know what's going to come out next. In this case, it paid off for me swimmingly, because we have AB7 0 and Lux Plus in one board right here. So I'm a happy, happy boy. In terms of the Halloween Nurse and Doctor, these two are pretty interesting boards. They're very, very, very geared around inflicting status and PvP, which is funny, being the Doctor being the thing that should cure you of status. But obviously the Halloween Doctor inflicts it. Very, very funny, huh? I get it. So we have Poison plus 2 max, Paralysis plus 2 max, Sleep 2 plus max, as well as AB7, AP plus, and Lux plus. That skill, pretty ignorable, like I just said before. It's going to fail 25% of the time, which, again, in my case, I don't like that at all. The other skills, though, have a 100% activation rate, which is very, very interesting. People are still running Zexion Plus to this day, even though it came out months ago, and it deals little to no damage, simply because of that Paralysis 2 max and how influential that thing is on the meta. And now, well, even though Sykes Plus was a funny thing, because Poison 2 Plus is obviously very, very good for just inflicting that status, you'd probably run that thing first to guarantee that your opponent was going to burn off there sooner, and then you could sleep them or paralyze them in following turns. But they put it on a medal, which was such a high damaging medal that a lot of people wanted to replace it with an attacking skill, which that makes a lot of sense, right? You've got such a high multiplier, you want to then take that and improve it further with a really high, nice damage increasing skill, not hinder that by making it, you know, forced to run a Poison 2 max. Anyway, now they're out in individual forms, and then not only that, but Sleep plus 2 max is out as well. The meta needs to prepare itself for this, basically, because again, Zexion was run for months and months and months after it was relevant, if it was ever relevant at all, simply because of how good that skill was, and now we have arguably a better one in Sleep 2 max. If you put Sleep plus 2 max at the back of your Keyblade, and your opponent, you know, in either offensively in either turn 1 or turn 3, and your opponent is, well, rather turn 3, and your opponent is then forced to guarantee miss 2 of their medals on their following Keyblade, that's huge. And a lot of Keyblades are going to have to be built with that in mind. You know, you're going to have a medal, your buffing medal basically be in the third. Your first two medals effectively have to be useless, which is crazy. You know, at that point, you may as well, I don't know, you kind of have to start running like a very, very, very heavy sleep resistance setups. Like, sleep resistance might become a more desirable trait as a result of these medals being in the game. Like, that's how influential they could be. As it stands right now, I think poison resistance is definitely the worst one in the entire game. And I would have said up until recently, sleep was the next most useless, but now that sleep 2 max is in the game, I think sleep resistance definitely just got a buff. Speaking of that, I mean, sorry to go on a tangent, but when they buffed grounds to -60 and aerial to -60, I don't understand why they didn't buff up these guys a little bit right now. Like, I don't know, 30% would have been nice maybe. Anyway, I think I'm going to have to get one of these boards, and I don't really know what I'm going to do with them just yet. I don't have any medals in mind that I can put them on. I think I'm going to be getting one of these boards, and I don't really know which medal I'm going to put them on just yet. It might sort of be just a future-proofing thing. Buffers right now have so much competition for the skills that they need to have equipped. You want to have either the current meta defense boost skill, or a defense boost, like let's say you have defense boost 4 max. You also probably want to have a defense boost 6 on there as well, if you're going to be like ultra meta, just to like wipe off as much damage as you can. But now you also want to have one of these like status setting medals somewhere. If you have, you know, poison or paralysis, you could either use that for their effects, or you could use it in turn 1 or turn 2 offensively, just to burn away your opponents sooner, and then try and sleep them or paralyze them in turn 3 if you want them to skip turns. It's like, it's a very, very interesting time in the game right now in terms of PvP meta, where we are right now. But yeah, with only 6 medals you're allowed to bring in, there's definitely a ton of competition. I've seen a lot of players, and myself included, have run, you know, not necessarily their strongest, highest damaging medals in favor of, you know, defense boost, you know, buffing medals, if you will, that don't necessarily need to hit with their highest strength, but instead have defense boost skills on them, which is crazy. Obviously, the biggest, you know, whales, if you will, in the game will have, you know, like foretellers or stained glass medals that in their own right deal tons and tons of damage, and go ahead and put a defense boost skill on them because they are technically the weakest medals on those people's setups, and they don't rely on that copy to complete PvE content as well, so they can just have a dedicated, you know, PvE copy of the medal, PvP copy of the medal with, you know, skills that don't really make sense in any other format apart from PvP. It's really crazy. It's a clever game that Square plays, basically. It's like, well, yeah, you have one copy of that medal, but maybe you need a few more. Maybe you need another Sephiroth just with poison on it, just because, you know, it's going to deal a lot of damage and also spread that status that you want to spread. So it's crazy, man. We're in a crazy time of this game right now. Okay, let's say you haven't bought any of the 8 boards yet. You've been waiting for, you know, my opinion, because obviously that's such a valued opinion. Anyway, you haven't bought any of the 8 boards. Let's say you've got, I don't know, Defense Boost 3 max running around, maybe 1 or 2 copies of Defense Boost 4 max, and you're not quite sure which ones to buy. You've spent a lot of jewels on Sephiroth, and you want to keep saving up for the future. You don't really know which ones to buy. What should you buy? So, in my opinion, it's either down to the Crow or the Werewolf, depending on what kind of game you want to run. So, if you want to improve your luck setup, obviously the Crow makes complete sense right there. Another second chance is always nice to have, but it's not like the best skill of the board. It's definitely down to the 7 and the 0, as well as the Lux Plus. The 7 and the 0 is very, very malleable, again, like I said, because you can turn a medal that costs 6, restores 3, bing bang boom, into a gauge restoring medal for you. And of course, AB6 Max Lux Plus Plus is the premier rating skill right now. In fact, if it was up to me, I'd have 1 buffer and the rest of my medals with AB6 Lux Plus Plus just across the entire board. But we can't all have what we want. The Werewolf is definitely a much more rounded one. You get 2 incredible attack boost skills. Whoopsie, 1, 2 right there. Again, you can go ahead and slap that AB7 Max Lux Plus on like any copy medal. Bang, right there. Completely perfect medal for that. Absolutely perfect skill to go on a copycat medal. Obviously, I've sung this medal's praises enough times, and DB4 Max is an incredible, incredible skill. You guys probably can't, unfortunately, see that, but on the left there, I've basically got 80%, 87.5%, and 90%, which are the activation rates of AB3, 4, and 5, respectively. You guys probably can't see that, unfortunately, but on the left there, I've got the damage reduction rates of AB3, 4, and 5, respectively, which are 3 max being 80%, 4 max being 87.5%, and 5 being 90%. So, as you can see, the jump between 3 to 4 is a much, much bigger jump than the jump between 4 to 5. So, what I'm getting at there is a lot of people have a lot of medals with DB4 Max right now. In fact, it's pretty rare for me to not run into a defense boost 4 max, just personally when I do PvP, at around the top 3 to 5,000 mark, sometimes better if I get lucky. What I'm getting at is if you invest in defense boost 4 max right now, even if defense boost 5 max comes out tomorrow, the difference isn't going to be that high. Like, it's pretty, like, you can definitely tell when someone's running defense boost 3 max, because you just gain a ton more damage, a real ton more damage when you go ahead and fight someone, you know, with 3 versus 4. But the jump between 4 to 5, it's definitely a jump still, of course, but it isn't that huge of a jump to the point where you're going to be, like, really sorely left behind if you don't have it. Obviously 4 to 6 is a bit bigger, but we'll have to go through defense boost 5 max before we get to defense boost 6 max. So, and we're pretty much running out of places to climb at that point. Like, the jumps are getting smaller and smaller each time. Anyway, it's going off tangent. That's another video. I think the Werewolf is probably a good catch-all board for a lot of players. Again, a lot of people do ignore raiding, so I can understand why you might want to skip the Crow entirely. I want it because I definitely want to get better at raiding. Like, I'm sort of pushing the cusp of top 100 in Leopardus every week. And with a couple of these, I might be able to do it. Who knows? But yeah, I think the Werewolf is probably the best board of all 8. But I do want to hear your opinions. I mean, for me, it makes perfect sense, but for you guys, you might not have any need for it. The Doctor's definitely the most unique, I reckon, just because, like I said, I'm going to have to get one of these things, but I don't really know what I'm going to use it for just yet. It's sort of future-proofing. And I definitely think the Cat is pretty skippable, but only in hindsight of what's come out afterwards. But yeah, let me know your opinions, guys. I'll catch you guys really soon. I do want to do a couple pulls, I think, on that Neku banner, just to get, again, a future-proofing to get some pet points for when, you know, I might get my Lucia next month, and then I'll be pretty close to rank 11, which would be pretty sweet. But anyway, that's enough talking anime. I'll see you guys really soon. All the best. Bye.